But next, are changes to fire services across the East Midlands putting lives at risk, or are they making them more efficient and better suited to changing demands? Well, that's the debate at the heart of a series of measures which include stations being closed and firefighters turning out to emergencies in smaller vehicles. Jane Dodge has this report.
They've just received a 999 call at Leicester Central Station and the crew are heading out. They get around 1,600 such call-outs a year. That may sound a lot, but nationally the number of fires has actually fallen in recent years. It seems these days fire crews are more likely to be called out to a road traffic accident. The other big change shaping the service is a cut in central government funding. This is one of 2 fire stations in Leicestershire facing possible closure. Proposals also include replacing 11 fire engines with 3 smaller tactical response vehicles and cutting 88 jobs.
The main driver for this is to make the fire service fit for purpose. We've had a 42% drop in call-outs in the last 10 years, and it's to turn the fire service into a rescue service that also attends fires.
These are the vehicles that could replace fire engines in Colville, Melton Mowbray and Bilston. But smaller vehicles mean less equipment, and that's a big concern for the Fire Brigade Union in Leicestershire.
It basically equates to a jet wash that you would find to do your own drive. So if you've got issues of where you need your drive doing, then you could call for a TRV, because that's pretty much all it's going to be capable of dealing with.
The union is angry that the £11 million spent on the new fire and rescue service headquarters in Leicester would have been better spent on frontline services. Nottingham is also getting a new fire station despite facing cuts in central government funding. There'll be a police presence here too, part of the closer working relationship between the emergency services. The Home Office wants to go one step further, making it a legal duty for the police, fire brigade and ambulance service to work together. And that could include some police and crime commissioners taking over fire and rescue authorities.
What's really important is a better service for people. Fire and rescue service, Nottinghamshire Police face big cuts in the future. Chancellor's asking us to make arrangements for cuts of up to 25% or up to 40%. If the 2 services could work closer together to save money, that's in the public interest.
Back in rural Leicestershire, the Kibworth fire station is also facing possible closure.
It'll take 1 or 2 children to be knocked off bikes or farm accidents, and then they'll be thinking, why on earth have we closed this fire station? I really hope it doesn't happen. Everything around here is changing so rapidly. They're making the villages bigger and bigger, and they're not keeping the infrastructure and the resources here.
A final decision on the changes in Leicestershire will be made early next year after public consultation. But the banner outside the station in Kibworth already seems out of date.
Nigel Mills, you could dress this up as efficiency savings, but these changes are being driven by cuts made by your government. And we heard from the Fire Brigades Union in our film, there is this real fear for public safety.
Yeah, I think we have to match the available funds with having the right service in the right place. And as your film said, the number of fire call-outs has gone down a huge amount in recent years.
But what about public safety?
By around 40%. So I think the important thing is that we have a fire service that's fit for the future with the right stations and the right equipment in the right place, so that the response when it's needed. And if your house is on fire, so you need the fire engine there as quickly as it can possibly be. But I think we have to say, can you really keep the same levels of spending on a service that has 40% fewer call-outs? I think people would actually wonder why you weren't moving money to other services in that situation. So we have to find a better way of doing it. There are savings from collaboration between fire authorities that could be made. There are savings from sharing resources with the police and the ambulance.
But you did hear what the Fire Brigades Union rep was saying there. You know, they've got this pump sort of water jet that they could clean your drive with, but I mean...
And we've had the same arguments in Derbyshire as well, where they've looked at the similar savings. But I think the important thing is you've got the right balance of the equipment and you send the right response to the right incident. If the smaller vehicles that can get there much more quickly, probably much easier to handle on the roads, have the right equipment on, I see no reason not to use them.
Michael, do you share the concerns expressed by the Fire Brigades Union?
Yes, certainly the cutbacks in Leicestershire are very severe. We're going to see nearly 90 firefighters lost, station closures, vehicles being lost. There's a huge amount of concerns. My own colleagues on Leicestershire, the Liberal Democrats on the Fire Authority, voted against the proposals. We're certainly going to oppose them because we don't think they're right. As we heard from the member of staff from the Fire Brigades Union themselves, they don't think these new response vehicles are going to be anywhere near as effective as the fire engines. So certainly we would want to see these cutbacks stopped, and I would hope as many people as possible would contribute to the consultation and say we don't want to see any more cutbacks to our fire services.
But Nigel Mills, we're hearing that there could be more cuts to come. We're expecting more in the Chancellor's autumn statement. How many more cutbacks can the fire service take?
Well, I think there is an important question there. That clearly is a level of service that we need. You need to have fire engineers to get every part of every county within the necessary time limits of about 8 to 10 minutes. So I think there probably is a limit to how many cuts they can take. But I think there are still some savings that can be made through a better working with other services, sharing premises and that kind of thing. I don't think we need to have separate police, fire and ambulance stations everywhere.
Well, we heard Alison Stollery, who lives next door to the Kibworth fire station. She was pointing out that places like the Kibworth, where she lives, are actually increasing. They're growing in size, more housing's being built. The worry is that the infrastructure won't be there to help cope if there is a fire, if you take away fire stations from places like Kibworth.
Yeah, I suppose you have to look at how many call-outs there are in an area and where it's best to site fire stations. There's no point citing fire stations where there's very, very rarely any call-outs. And obviously a large amount of fire stations are staffed by volunteer crews who according where needed. Clearly that's a more cost-effective approach, but you can't have those for every
So even if villages grow, you wouldn't keep a fire station there?
Well, I don't know that circumstance, but there is a fire station in Derbyshire that had extremely few call-outs a year. That makes it very hard to keep your staff up to date with training. It makes it very hard to motivate staff to be there. So I think you have to look and say, where are our fire hotspots? And there's a lot of data on that. Where are our fire stations? Are they in the right place to respond to those fire hotspots? So I say this having had 2 pretty serious fire incidents in my constituency in recent months, including one last weekend. I know the great work they do, and I know how important they are to get them there as fast as you possibly can.
Well, savings can be made though, can't they, Michael? I mean, Derbyshire tell us that they've cut almost £6 million and they've actually achieved savings ahead of target by working more closely with police and ambulance services.
Savings can be made, but we've got to ensure that we've still got quality services. I mean, many years ago in Hinckley in 2009, there were cutbacks to the fire service then that I and my colleagues were involved in and campaigned against and got huge amounts of support for locally. And we had cutbacks then, so to have further cutbacks now is really worrying and really concerning. And you have to reach a stage where you say a service is essential as the fire service. Do we want to see it cut back, especially when, for example, the Fire Brigades Union themselves who work in the industry are saying these are bad cuts? I think we have to listen to them.
How do we fund that though? I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Should we be paying more tax? We pay towards it from our council tax. Is that something we should be looking at?
In the case of Leicestershire, what they've suggested is if they move out of the very expensive headquarters in Birstall, which was about 11 million and is only half used, into other fire stations, you could save the money that way rather than removing all these fire engines and jobs.
And we see in Derbyshire the HQs moving into my constituency to share with the police headquarters. So there are savings that are being made. I think the problem we have as a country is we're still spending somewhere around 70 billion more than we're raising in tax. There's no easy way to raise funds for each service in that situation. We've seen the Lib Dems this week saying they are the party of fiscal responsibility still. I mean, you kind of see if they start opposing every saving in every service, it makes it hard to make that credible.
Okay. Well, the party conference season is well underway and the leaders of the main political parties have been lining up to give us interviews, parading their knowledge of the East Midlands and bigging up their prospects here. Our political editor Tony Rowe has caught up with no less than 3 of them this week. First up, he's been speaking to UKIP's Nigel Farage.
You were perhaps seen as the anti-establishment party, and you now have a Labour leader who is seen as anti-establishment. So you're in danger of losing those votes.
Well, you're right. I mean, Corbyn is anti-establishment. After all, he wants to get rid of the Queen. He wants to give the Falklands away. He wants to abolish the army. He wants unlimited immigration. And on the one anti-establishment ticket where he might have connected with a lot of old Labour voters in the East Midlands, namely his opposition to the European Union, he's even surrendered that. So I think actually Corbyn's North London middle-class brand of anti-establishmentarianism actually leaves a large chunk of old Labour voters in the East Midlands who will look at UKIP again.
Nigel Farage, their leader of UKIP. And next up, it was Green Party leader Natalie Bennett, who praised Nottingham's tram system but was disappointed that it didn't link up to East Midlands Airport.
Well, indeed, I think it was the first week of your new tram network. I got to visit the university. I caught the tram back to the train station, and it looks great. And there were a lot of people using it, which is great to see. But again, that's the kind of failure of linked upness, of getting a transport plan, not just having isolated projects. That's a real failure.
We have 300 people who work for Rolls-Royce in Derby on the nuclear submarines. Now, what do you have to say to them? Because your policy wouldn't really take away their jobs.
Well, what they have is a tremendous range of skills that would be of great use in a wide range of areas. One of them being, for example, renewable energy. Now, we've actually seen the head of the Confederation of British Industry come out this week attacking the Tory government's policies for failing to support green industries. You know, I don't want to see anyone thrown out of work. I want to see people able to work on constructive projects that make everyone's life better. And that's renewable energy. It's not hideous weapons of mass destruction that we can never use.
Well, it's certainly been a busy first few weeks for our new political editor, Tony Rowe, and he's here in the studio with us for the very first time. Welcome, Tony. And of course, you've been speaking to Nigel Farage and Natalie Bennett, and they didn't really make a breakthrough here in the East Midlands in the election. Do they genuinely think that UKIP and the Greens can be successful here?
It's one thing saying it, it's another thing thinking it. And I think momentum is important for them. The Greens have gathered a bit of momentum this week. They've got a party conference coming up, and Natalie Bennett has seized on the emissions scandal involving VW by saying it just shows that industry is rotten and politics is rotten and financial sector is rotten. UKIP, they are going hell for leather on the EU vote. So that they've both got something to play for at the moment. They've both got something to build on.
Got a story to tell. OK, well, Nigel, you got re-elected with an increased majority, but there's not much room for complacency, let's face it. UKIP took 7,000 votes in Amber Valley, and your majority is around 4,000, so it wouldn't take too much, really, would it, to threaten your seat?
Well, I mean, I went from having a much slimmer majority than that, so I know all about the risks if people change their mind. I think UKIP do strike a chord with people who have some traditional views, people who are worried about their jobs and the threat for immigration. They're worried about some public services. They believe welfare's too high. So, I mean, I can see that they'll still have some appeal. I think the EU referendum, when that comes, will be a big watershed for them. It's hard to see, once the people have decided which way on that, what the future is for a UK independence party. They'll have to find a way of reinventing themselves, whatever the result of that.
Okay.
But I think if Labour do really move away from speaking for those ordinary working people, and sadly some of them haven't yet been convinced to vote Conservative, I think perhaps UKIP do have a large number of voters to go out there.
Well, Michael, your vote in Bosworth went down 11%, and again it was, of course, UKIP who benefited, up 15% and threatening to overtake you.
Well, we're still clearly the main opposition party in Bosworth. Lib Dems were second for the last 2 elections in a row, clearly ahead of the other parties. And if you look at the local government situation, obviously on the Bosworth Council, we've got a dozen council seats. There were no UKIP, they didn't come close to winning any. And if you look across the East Midlands region, although parties such as Greens and UKIP can pick up votes, that doesn't often turn into, for example, local government seats, which is the base. And I think as a party, the one thing that certainly sustained the Lib Dems across the East Midlands and the rest of the country is we've still got lots of councillors there on the ground in communities. We haven't really seen that massive breakthrough here from UKIP or the Greens yet.
OK, well, Tony, not so long ago, we would have just been talking about Labour and Conservatives in the East Midlands. Now, of course, we're discussing UKIP, the Greens, Lib Dems too. Is two-party politics over in the East Midlands? Is it gone?
I don't think you can say anything's over in politics, and we've seen in Leicester South, I think it was, before 2010 when Labour were in power and the Lib Dems won a seat in a by-election. There can be very big shifts, and the interesting thing now is what's going to happen with Labour, with Jeremy Corbyn in charge. No one knows how the electorate's going to react. No one thought he would actually win at the start. He was 200 to 1. So we just need to find out, and the Labour conference this weekend will give us an idea maybe of what's going to happen next. OK,
well, to top off the trio of leaders for now at least, Tony's also been speaking to the new Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and here's what he had to say on how he would win over the East Midlands.
Point out to everyone that an incoming Labour government will challenge the whole political choice of austerity, which is so damaging to so many local public services, will challenge the policies of zero-hours contracts and frozen wages, will invest in infrastructure and new industries in this country. So we'll have an expanding economy, better employment opportunities, better housing policies, so that young people will actually be able to get somewhere to live. All those things are possible and all those things are achievable, and above all will be achieved.
When we spoke to Nigel Farage, he said that Labour voters who had gone to UKIP wouldn't be enticed by a London-centric, middle-class-led Labour Party.
Well, I'm not particularly interested in getting into a debate with Nigel Farage about where people come from or what social class they're from. What I am interested in is policies that will help ordinary people all over this country. Ordinary people that need housing, need a good health service, need a good education service. That is what Labour offers. That is what Labour is determined to deliver.
So Tony, Jeremy Corbyn there dismissing Nigel Farage's claims that he won't connect with voters here in the East Midlands. What's your reading of that?
Well, he always seems, and I saw him at the rally in Nottingham, he always steers away from personal attacks and abuse, and it's something he always
doesn't engage
says.
With that.
He doesn't want to know. He will blanket, or he will say he's not interested in taking part in that. And we saw that in the first Prime Minister's Question Time, where he had a debate. He brought questions in, got the Prime Minister to answer them, so there was no shouting. And it's going to be interesting to see how long that truce lasts, whether politicians will have a debate for everyone to see, or whether the volume goes up again.
How long will that truce last?
I think we generally behave quite well, except for that half an hour of Prime Minister's question. So there's many
not
hours
many people like that,
of televised, quite sensible debates people choose not to watch. So I think people want to see at PMQs a opposition leader holding the Prime Minister to account and probably showing some passion and views of his own and showing he's a leader. I'm not sure you can do that with 6 questions from members of the public on different topics each time.
Are you worried though about a Corbyn-led Labour Party, Nigel?
I mean, I think we should worry if you ever had any chance of being in power. I mean, I think you saw the stock market get...
You don't think that's likely?
I think you saw the markets get very nervous, the idea of Ed Miliband being Prime Minister. I mean, just imagine what would happen if they thought that Jeremy Corbyn might. But I think he's going to have to convince people in the East Midlands in a seat like mine how if he really does favour unlimited immigration, he doesn't support welfare reform, he's not very friendly towards business and he supports terrorist groups, how that's going to appeal to many people in this area. I doubt that any of those views will.
OK, well, Michael, Tim Farron was speaking on Sunday Politics last week and he predicted that Labour voters and politicians would be leaving to join the Lib Dems. Have you any evidence of that happening?
I think a lot of Labour members and supporters will be very concerned about the far-left views of Jeremy Corbyn. They are outside the mainstream of the Labour Party. He is further to the left than Neil Kinnock and other Labour leaders in the past. He does have some way-out views on a lot of foreign policy issues particularly, and people will be worried about his economic policies and the far-left policies he's got. So I think a lot of people will be concerned and worried. And in the Lib Dems, you've got a moderate party, but also a party that wants to bring about social reform and more fairness in society, and you're going to have that without having the extremism of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party.
Tony, what do you hear? What do you think about what our guests are saying in the studio?
Well, I just think it's really exciting times to be looking at politics and be interested in politics, because, as I said earlier, we don't know what is going to happen. We simply don't know. Nobody I spoke to at Westminster, my first trip down there, said that they predicted that Jeremy Corbyn would win. All the pundits said they were wrong. And I just don't think you can predict what is going to happen. Who knows what the public reaction is going to be to Jeremy Corbyn when it comes to the ballot box.
Your feet haven't touched the ground, have they?
No.
Well, it's good to have you on board.